Overwatch 2 (1) has seen better days, and there's a new kid on the block. Marvel Rivals. I don't think it's too much of a reach to say that it seems like the best games come from China now, and I have no problem with that. NetEase doesn't have the best track record, but Marvel Rivals is definitely doing a few things right. The fast time to kill, the skill expression, the one aspect that caught my attention almost immediately was the creative direction. There's this beautiful merge between comic style lines and strokes with that familiar stylized 3D aesthetic. It just looks really great and it works. I'm a creative director myself, which basically means I'm a designer with a flashy title and I get to point at things and say, this looks great, this doesn't, maybe we should change this. So in this video, I'm going to try and analyze, break down the art direction and, unique attributes of the Marvel Rivals style, and then try to recreate that style myself with a concept art for a character that hasn't been added to the game yet, but likely will. If you want to see me barely succeed at a digital painting, feel free to skip to the chapter in the timeline. Marvel Rivals does, in my opinion, an exceptional job at making the player feel like they're the hero in-game. The painterly comic style that they incorporated throughout the characters, as well as the maps, is a nod to really the roots of the Marvel Universe. Everything jumps at you and pushes that feeling of idolization. One example of this is the hover interaction on the Heroes page, where they incorporated this cool parallax effect, almost as if they're popping out of the screen or page. Rivals also remains consistent with clear visual cues for the abilities, environmental changes too. The art direction simply ensures that players have a good understanding of the game state at all times. This clarity helps in decision making during faster paced gameplay, putting the player's experience first by sort of reducing confusion and maybe enhancing strategic depth. It's by no means perfect, but the direction is clear. Regardless of whether you play the game or enjoy the game, consistency in direction takes a lot of work, usually across multiple departments, and it's just something that you can easily respect. If we look at some concept art from Marvel Rivals, there's a few repeating creative elements that persist through the art and into the game itself. We've got speed and motion lines, great contrast between the characters and the maps. You'll also notice that objects and models are typically wrapped in dark strokes that distinguish the edges. League of Legends has a similar feature, and they call it character inking. Marvel Rivals uses this religiously. What caught my eye was how they applied this character inking concept for the in-game models and even their marketing material. If you're not super involved in art or design, this is something you probably wouldn't notice or pay much attention to. But if we rotate her, you can see this white outline that seems to hover in place. It's a subtle effect that doesn't get too much in the way of the character, but it still simulates sort of a stylized side profile lighting. In other places, they'll layer this effect with blue or pink, resembling a sort of familiar chromatic aberration effect. You can see the same creative elements in some of their flat promotional graphics. Let me preface this by saying I am not a painter. It's more of a hobby for me, and my 4 brain cells typically have to rely on some level of photo manipulation or matte painting techniques in order to finish something that looks somewhat presentable. What I wanted to do was give a whirl at Blade. He's definitely one of my favorite Marvel characters. I think he's coming to Marvel Rivals soon. I saw someone on X tweet about that, which means it's true. So I wanted to apply everything I learned about Rivals creative direction and whip up sort of a promotional artwork for what Blade might look like when he drops in game. So I found this picture of Wesley Snipes from the Blade movie and I pulled it into Photoshop. I'm going to use it just as a reference, but also as an underlayer to kind of paint over. I knew that before I kind of started painting, I needed to kind of match the proportions of how heroes are portrayed in Rivals and comics, historically. So I'm using the pen tool to just kind of separate out his body from his head. And then I'm going to use the liquify tool and just some basic transforms to make his shoulders a little bit bigger, his arms a little bigger. And in the hopes that with the final result, he'll look a little bit more cartoony, comic, etc. I don't really have a starting point where I go, okay, I'm ready to start painting. A lot of my workflow with this kind of practice project is a little bit more freeform. I'm usually zooming out a lot, changing the background color to make sure that it kind of meshes with the subject, maybe pulls in colors from existing material that's already out there. So you can see I've got kind of pulled in like a Blade movie poster alongside my work, just so that I can kind of, eye drop some colors and see what works. I definitely wanted a textured background and lighting that I didn't have to tweak too much. And like I said, I don't really have a method with this. I've only done this maybe a handful of times, but really what I'm doing is just sampling colors underneath, painting over some of the more obvious shapes. I kind of see it like tracing at the start, and then as I continue to paint over things, use different blending brushes, at some point I can kind of detach myself from the reference and take it in kind of a different direction. What I find really helps is definitely establishing where the lighting is coming from early on. If you're going to do something like this, you've kind of got two options. You can either use the lighting that's already there, like from the photo or the reference image you have. You can use existing lighting. So like if we look at his sleeves, you can see there's obvious bright white coming from maybe the top in front. And there's also a white light behind him casting kind of like a rim light on the bottom of his cloak. I went back and forth on this, and again, it was a really good learning experience for me because I was thinking about maybe using like a red highlight on the sleeve instead. You can really see me just going back and forth on a lot of different ideas in a pretty short amount of time, and I think it's a really fun kind of just way to figure out what you do and don't know in terms of painting. I am a self-taught painter. I didn't go to art school. Because of that, I just have like a really weird, strange way of approaching artworks like this. I really try to avoid ever teaching things in terms of painting directly, like saying do this, do that. I think it's more useful if you're an artist that's up and coming, or maybe you're an expert painter and you're watching this and like pulling your hair out. I think what I can offer with a video like this is more higher level thinking, just how to approach artwork in general, and using some of my knowledge from graphic design, which is my specialty. There's a lot of parallels, and so there's some things that I still have really no idea how to do. There's some things that I think I can apply from design into painting pretty easily, and it works. For instance, I was really happy with how I kind of formed his jawline there and chin with those darker strokes. I think that worked really well. And then there's very clearly some areas where nothing is working, like what I'm doing with his hairline right now. I do actually get that a little figured out eventually later, but even watching this back, I can see that it's clearly just it's clearly a blending problem. You also might notice throughout this that I toggle on and off what I'm painting and then my reference image beneath. I kind of do that as like a benchmark to make sure I'm not going too far off of what I'm referencing, just in terms of color. I'm going to let this painting portion play out, and then I'll come back when I'm working on the finalized portion with the graphics and the text, etc. Okay, so we're getting to the end. I got to a point where I felt comfortable enough with the painting portion. All the tabbing back and forth that I was doing, I was referencing a image from Rival's Twitter account. It was a promo image for a couple of the new skins, and the reason I kept pulling it up is because I was trying to mimic, you'll see I'm trying to mimic the white character inking that we talked about before. It was a little bit trickier than I thought, at least with, just kind of using a brush, but I think it came up pretty good at the end. I also played around with, you can also see me starting to play around with the pink. A lot of the final touches comes down to making that background, expanding it a bit, making sure that the lighting and the colors are working together. I went with this almost like floral backgrounds. I don't remember exactly what the brush was that I used. I think it was from one of Adobe's fall, I think it was a fall brush set. I believe it's a foliage brush. I had this idea of like a sword slash in a bright color that contrasted with the background of the character, and I landed on that kind of general shape. And then I'm just adding the Marvel Rivals logo to the corner, and yeah, throw some text on top, and here's the final result. I'm pretty happy with how it came out. Obviously, the painting itself could use a lot of work. It's funny because whenever you look back at your artwork, you'll usually notice like 10 to 12 things that for some reason you just couldn't see in the process, and you're like, wow, that looks terrible. But, equally, there's things you can see and you're like, wow, that actually looks really great. If you want to see, more videos like this, definitely let me know. And I encourage you to try something yourself. See you guys next time.